If you've been generating leads for your legal firm but struggle to get instructions, marketing may not be your problem. It might actually be your sales process that's silently killing your conversion rate. I've seen firms spend money on marketing and get leads and then blame the leads as low quality because they're price shoppers. But when in actual fact, if you were to record the calls and track the data and listen back to them, you would then find out what the real problem is. In this video, I'll show you how we pinpointed that exact problem for one of our clients and what we put in place to solve it. So, how did we even get here? When I first started marketing, I had a client and we were generating leads for them, but they weren't getting instructions and I was kind of confused as to why that was the case. We were doing everything correct. I could see that the adverts we were putting out were good. The leads coming through looked like they were high quality, but for some reason when it came to the conversion rate to instruction was very low. So I thought to myself, let me record the sales calls and actually see how the sales team is handling the leads that are coming through. And it completely shocked me. And it also shocked my client as well. Because what their team was saying on the sales call when they were talking to new leads is not what the business owner actually wanted them to say. Now, it wasn't necessarily the team's fault because the business owner hadn't given them a step-by-step procedure as to how they should contact leads coming from this specific traffic source. And the reason why I say this specific traffic source is because the leads that were coming through are leads coming through from a cold traffic source. Whereas the way that the team was talking to the leads, it was if they were coming from a warm traffic source. Let's say a friend referred or a family referred. And even though the sales process wasn't good, even if it was for a warm referral, you can imagine that if you have a sales process that doesn't really work that well on warm referrals, but it still does the job purely because it was a warm referral and the person trusts the person that referred them in, you can imagine how that would completely not work on a cold traffic source where the people that are coming through, they actually don't really have any previous knowledge of who your business is. So even though the people are very interested in their service, the way you speak to them would have to be very different to the way you speak to someone who is coming from a referral. And it became clear to me that the client's team didn't know this. And unless we had recorded the calls and actually listened back to them, we would never have known that the real issue wasn't the fact that the leads were unqualified, but it was that the way that the team were talking to the leads was incorrect. And this is really important because the client would have tried many different types of marketing angles before coming to use our service. But what they wouldn't have known is that some of those angles probably could have worked if their team was actually dialed in terms of what they're saying to these leads. And it's only because we recorded the call that we then found out the real problem that they were having. And then we could train the team on how to best go about handling new leads that were coming through. I know so far that I shared that their team wasn't doing a good job on the actual sales calls, but it would be good to actually share with you what they were doing that could have been improved so that if you're doing sales yourself, then you know what to improve on. And also if you have a team that's doing sales, you also know what to look out for to make sure that they're actually doing the very best job possible to get you more leads to turn into instructions. When listening back to the calls, the first thing we noticed was confidence and taking control of the call at the very start. When a new lead would come in, the team member would call the person, they would say hello, and then the other person would say hello back. And then there'll just be a pause and a kind of awkward silence. And it was like no one really knew what was going to happen next. So that was the first slightly red flag. The second thing that would happen next is the person would ask, or their sales team would ask, how can we help? And then the person on the phone would be wondering, how can you help with what? Of course, the person would have mentioned what organization they were from, but let's say the lead had filled in the form maybe 2 days ago. They may not necessarily remember the name of the company that they saw on the ad. So once again, you have this kind of friction building up at the call that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And what would slightly make that worse is because when the person then sounded a little bit confused, then it made the sales team lose a little bit of confidence. So you could hear it in their voice that they were a little bit hesitant. And of course, sounding a little bit hesitant or sounding like you're lacking a bit of confidence on a call with a lead that you're meant to help achieve a particular goal, it doesn't necessarily set the best precedent for the next steps occurring. So that would be the first thing, making sure that there's confidence and that there's actually clarity when taking control of the call and there's a lot of framing. So the way that we would frame the call is we start off by saying, hey, my name is Radman. I just saw that you filled in a form on Facebook regarding help with divorce or regarding help with this particular thing, and then ask a leading question into what I want them to go on to next. So then that way, when the person's hearing that, they know exactly, okay, this person is not a cold caller. They know that I filled in the form and they sound very certain and very assured of what is actually going to happen next, and that helps move the process along a lot smoother. Another main point as well is really understanding the person's pain, why they need help and why this is important to them before moving into things like the price and how your service actually solves the problem that they have. It's really good to make the person actually feel the emotions that come with the problem that they're experiencing, so that when you're then pitching your service, that they can actually clearly see themselves why your service actually helps them with the problem that they're facing. But if you just start pitching the service without getting the person to actually explain why they need your help and feel why they need your help, then it's most likely going to fall on deaf ears. And this also goes on to how we frame the price to the person and how we manage the whole pricing structure on the call as well. With the client that we were working with, they would say to the lead, our service costs, let's say, £400 plus VAT an hour. And then the lead would obviously ask a very important question of, well, how many hours would this take roughly? And then the firm, they wouldn't necessarily know how many hours it would take roughly. So they would just say, well, we don't know how many hours it will take just yet until we get you booked in and we help you out. And this then comes back to the client, who'd be a bit confused as to, well, if it's £400, let's say £400 an hour, then am I going to end up spending £4,000 for 10 hours? Is it going to be £40,000 if it is 100 hours? And you can see quite quickly how that can add up. And it's just because the way they mentioned the price is they mentioned it as a very open-ended price, and it wouldn't be very clear to the potential lead, well, what are they actually getting for this £400, and how much is this, and how much is this actually going to cost me in total, which of course, as you can imagine from a lead perspective, is quite a valid point to want to know. The other issue with this is when you start mentioning that you're only charging a certain amount per hour and you haven't had any context as to why the person should pay that certain amount per hour, then what that client is then going to do is they're going to then go to other solicitors and other firms and then find out, okay, well, how much do these people charge per hour? And then it's going to become a race to the bottom in terms of price, because they're just focused on, well, you charge £400 an hour, well, how much does the next person charge? And it's very unlikely, because we only saw it work once in this particular case when the client was actually like, okay, they're willing to pay that amount of money, but it's very unlikely that a person will take that next step with you straight away if you mention that your price is just an hourly rate without ever checking what other people's hourly rates are, especially considering that they don't know how much it's going to be costing them roughly overall. Now, those are a few tips to make sure that you're improving your sales process so that you get more instructions out of the leads that you do have coming through. And what we always say is that if you don't track something, you can't improve it. So I've included a list of software down below that you can install to help record your sales calls and make sure that your team is performing to a high level. You can click the link in the description to get that list of software that we use internally. Alternatively, if you'd like to implement a proven sales script and sales function for your firm, you can click the link in the meeting below to have a meeting with our team, and we'll show you exactly how to do that for your specific firm to make sure that you get more instructions out of the leads that you have currently coming through.